If you're business minded or entrepreneurial, how many times have you heard the idea that keep going, keep trying, one day you're going to be successful? Whether it's, 2 years of grind or 10 years, or the idea that you have to have 1,000 failures, but that 1,001st failure is where you find success. I want to share my story because while I don't consider myself exactly where I want to be, I think that I'm starting to get out of the entrepreneur type quagmire. So I look at it like this, like an airplane trying to take off, or a space shuttle trying to reach orbit, right? You're going to eventually escape, right? You're eventually going to take flight. You may sputter along the runway for a little while, but eventually you kind of start to get off the ground, get in the air, maybe hop along. So I'm kind of in that hop along / getting up in the air. I'm not a mile up yet, but I'm getting there in my own entrepreneurial / business journey. But what I wanted to do, because we're still kind of in the introduction phase of the channel, this is video 2 out of 100 that I'm doing as part of this 100 video challenge that I'm taking part in. And I wanted to tell my story of a lot of failures and then where I'm now starting to see some success, some positive movement forward. So my entrepreneurial story actually started at a pretty young age in, grade school. My first real true hustle, if you want to call it that, was selling goats. I know that's crazy. I could sell a meat goat for $80, $90, and then I bred show goats, and I could sell a show goat for over $100, $150 maybe. Now, I also bred the goats, like I mentioned, and I would show them, and if you took a goat to show and placed or got an award of some kind, you could auction the goat, and you could auction goats for over $500. I know I had one for $700, and I've seen some people get over $1,000 for an auction goat. And what's great about it is sometimes the people who buy your goat, they're doing it just to raise awareness for their business, or whatever the case may be. It's a charity thing, so you can actually buy your goat back for less than $100, or even they gift it back to you. So that was my first real hustle as a child. That would have been, I think I started that actually in elementary school. Growing up, I did a lot of odd jobs like any kid. Plant a hayfield, get blisters on the tips of your fingers. I would help fix fences or barns or whatever needed doing, $30 here, $20 there. And some of that was quite fun. I got to ride horses a lot just because the horses needed to be ridden, or because someone I knew was doing a competition. They needed someone there to help warm up the horse. But, is that really a hustle? I'm not sure. My high school hustle, though, was flipping cards. So think Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, any of those kinds of cards. We'd go down to Walmart, buy some packs. You could flip a pack and double your money. Say the pack was $2.50. You could often get $4, $5, $6 off of a pack, but sometimes you could get lucky and turn around and flip those packs for $30, plus dollars if you had a very good rare or something like that in the pack. You could also get the elements and the power-ups and things that people need a lot of and maybe often don't have, and you could sell those in bulk and make a little extra money as well. I'd say that hustle has probably gone away in the modern age. I found, maybe 10 years ago when I was trying to do this again, that a lot of the modern card shops don't want to buy anymore. If they do, it's a hassle. When I was doing this is back when you still had to have an updated card catalog. Everyone was referencing catalogs. Well, then in my 20s, I had some success with trading. I was always fascinated with trading. Ended up having a little bit of success there. This is before crypto. But I think I was kind of like your modern day meme coiner. I think I just got lucky. While I did have a system, I was nowhere near as disciplined as a day trader or a swing trader or even a long-term trader really needs to be, but I did have some success. I don't guess that really qualifies into the whole entrepreneur field that I'm really trying to tackle here today, though. So my first real foray into business is in my 20s. I was real active in politics. I even got elected to a internal, not external, got elected into a county chairman position, Well, in my politics, I met a friend of mine who he was kind of a hustler, you could say, and he taught me a lot about business, politics, finance. Very, very intelligent guy with a lot of wasted potential. And his whole shtick was he would drive around Dallas-Fort Worth area here in Texas and try to get for sale by owner financing on these homes, right? So if he could get a home financed by the owner for $900 a month, he would turn around and rent it out for $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 a month and live off of the profit there. And he had about 10, 15 properties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that he was running that little, not scam, little operation. Well, I guess he sold everything, moved on to some family land and lived in a barn dominium and started to get active in politics. And this guy's a lot like me, either never went to college or never finished college. And so his whole thing was go big or go home. So him and I got together and we started a little business. He had always been, like I said, a hustler. We had a little, what he called at the time, private note brokerage, and we had hired some people and things were really rolling along, and then he just up and disappeared. And I guess turns out he had gone to South America randomly. Who knows why? Who knows what the real reason behind it was? But when he came back, it was one of those as if nothing had ever happened. And he asked about one of our employees that was obviously no longer an employee of ours. And he kind of just wrote the whole thing off. And he came back. He had had some severe medical issues that had, I think, brought him back to the country. And it just seemed like he had kind of lost his mind. He was still fairly brilliant, still very business-minded, but the businesses he was coming up with, I mean, one of them was highly inappropriate. Like, I don't even think YouTube, like I said, I'm so new to YouTube, I don't know if you can even talk about one of his business ideas. It was really bad. And I let him stay with me for a while, and, you know, you could just tell reality was slipping, and he actually passed a few years later, so he's not with us anymore. I kind of got back into trading a little bit. I went through some personal stuff, and at that point in time, I kind of settled on the career that I have now. So my late 20s and most of my 30s have been focusing on, you know, growing as an engineer. But there was one brief stint in there where I became part owner of a meadery. So think honey wine, right? Like you see at the Renaissance festivals. And this was the first time I had lost a significant amount of money as an investment, because the owner, the main guy, he went through a divorce, and turns out his wife was the genius behind the whole thing, and everything kind of fell apart, and he kind of started self-sabotaging in this area, and that was kind of the end of that. And that was a pretty significant loss, but, you know, financially, and a big waste of time, a lot of hope down the drain. But that's part of it. Maybe you've been through it. And I definitely want to elaborate on this story in later videos too, because I do want to help people avoid pitfalls. But for this video, I'm just kind of running through my thing and telling people, hey, you know, you can eventually get there, but you do have to be persistent, and you will have to overcome some hardship. So fast forward to where I start seeing success in the modern era, right? The modern era, the past 2-3 years. At the end of 2022 and then 2023, I really started to take business serious. Up until that point, I had always been a entrepreneur. I had always had ideas. Maybe I'd make a website, maybe I'd do this, that, and the other, but I'd never follow through and really seriously dig in. Well, we finally started to dig in. And a buddy and I, we started a recruiting agency. And the recruiting agency fell apart because it was going to be a lot more money up front than what we felt comfortable investing, because we needed to actually provide medical insurance before we had even placed a recruit. So we had a client, right? We got a client, and the client required medical coverage for their contractors. Well, we couldn't afford upfront medical coverage to the tune of hundreds of dollars a month before we ever got paid. Now, maybe I was misled through the process, but I said, hey, look, you know, we don't have any backing, like financially, so we can't really follow this path any longer. But it was cool that we at least landed a corporate client, you know, someone looking for workers. Then at the end of 2023, I got involved with 2 businesses. The first one was run by a couple of brothers. It was a technology firm, and it was just by sheer merit of me being an engineer and me networking and knowing people. They picked me up because they needed an AWS architect for their company. And after a while of working with them, they said, hey, look, you know, You're going to get ownership. You're going to get $100 an hour. You can basically pick your title. And we put about a year and some change into that business. And the CTO and those guys have been doing it for a couple of years already. And it seemed legit. It seemed very serious. We had politicians involved in the business, attorneys. And one attorney in particular ended up being kind of a snake in the grass and kind of start the beginning of the end, the derailing of this company, right? Well, as you can probably infer, that company didn't really go anywhere. They open sourced the technology, and one day it was just kind of gone. Technology's still out there. The technology does have value, but there was a lot of mismanagement, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of not being aggressive and acting quickly enough to actually make a successful business. But simultaneously, a buddy and I started an agency. Now this buddy, I had worked with him as a salesman before. He had a mom and pop web design shop. And we would do things like go door to door in offices wearing kilts, trying to, get web design clients. So we started this agency, and things were going quite well. We got up to about $3,500 MRR. So we were, okay. It's funny, what keyed us in to start the agency is because I was unemployed. Well, when the agency started, I had income again, but my friend was unemployed. So the $3,000 a month was basically going to pay his bills because we had to keep him afloat. Well, he moved across the country, which was fine, and he made some decisions kind of unilaterally, like paying for a very expensive kind of CRM. You may have heard like Vendasta, high level. We just weren't making any money to cover the $300 a month. And then he rented a small room, office room, I guess for visibility, things like that. And that was another $300 a month. So he made a few decisions that I disagreed with. And we hit some snags along the way. Well, ultimately he had a death in the family. And when he had a death in the family, he said, look, I just want to go back to being an engineer. And, I make enough money. It's just not worth it. So we basically let that business go, which was a shame because him and his wife were the best web developers and designers I've ever met in my entire life. And that's a skill that I just don't have myself. So after that, I got involved in a few more little things. And one of them was, shipping things. We do like drop shipping, FBA, things like that. And we're making thousands of dollars a month off that now, but we're still kind of, we were upside down for a very long time, and now we're just not even quite breaking even yet. So what I didn't realize about drop shipping and FBA and things like that is, and it seems so obvious now, is, you have to have the money up front to buy the inventory. Even when you're drop shipping, if it's a $10 item, you got to pay the $10, you got to pay $4 or $5 in shipping, and then hopefully you can charge $20 and make $5, and it's very, very much a pain. So I've definitely shifted my strategy off of the Shopify stuff. We're just doing FBA, and I'm reworking the Shopify side of that business, and probably dropping Shopify and everything else. That's actually the plan, to save more money. And I'll go into all that in another video. I just wanted to tell you all, hey, there is something that has begun working. Then I started another almost agency, but let's call it more of an AI focused agency, where I had gotten some clients and I was doing client work, and I decided, what? I hated client work when it was the other agency. I hate client work with this agency. For example, I said up front, we're not web developers. We will give you a generic landing page, because if you just don't have a landing page, you need something. But if you want to make it all these different things, you need to go find a web developer. And it was the back and forth, the headache that comes with client work. And so I pivoted that whole company away from client work, and it's all 100% productized. It's all AI shield wall in front of me, whether it's chatbots or voice agents. It's protecting me from client work, essentially. And I'm just working on more products. I'm working on another shop, and I have this new agency. If that's the best word, I don't really have a word for it yet. It's just this new agency that is working for me, fully productized, fully automated. Starting to see some success there. Like I said, I've got clients. Now they're the old traditional agency model clients, so I'm actually offboarding them, if you would, and sliding them into a productized thing. Except for one of them, we're kind of close close-ish. We're not close friends, but we know each other through the same circles, I guess is the right word. So I'll work with him on getting his business off the ground. And he's making a living. He's making about $5,000 a month. He had lost his job unexpectedly, and he told me about it the day he lost it. I said, well, let's get you what you need to live. And so he's making about $5,000-$6,000 a month now. So, it's proof is in the pudding, right? Like the process works. So that's success. We're starting to see some lift off there. And I've started to see some success with social media and things like that. Obviously, YouTube is new. And I want to talk about social media and digital content creation, all that in a different video, because I feel like the whole entrepreneur thing and then social media, yeah, they're both businesses, they're both the same, but I feel like my social media journey, which I've been on for about 3 years now, is a completely different beast that we need to unpack. And for, Business Wednesdays, I don't have a name for it yet, but I'm going to say like Business Wednesdays, we're going to just talk your typical business model, like you might see. Like if I was selling bricks, I'd talk about my brick factory, right? That's what I'm talking about. Or we live in the age of the internet, so we're going to talk about, copywriting, drop shipping, things of that nature. And then I'll do social media kind of on its own thing, even though they all tie together and they all do go hand in hand, and one builds off of the other. But so I'm not quite in a successful position, right? But I wanted you to see, 10 plus 15 years of failure, right? I had success as a kid, right? Because you're not trying to live off of your childhood hustles, but you can still make money to go buy all this cool stuff. But in my 20s, right, you can see that I sputter along, and there's failures and failures and failures all the way through my 30s when I shut things down and focus on my career. And now we're back in my 30s, and I sputtered along for 2 years, and I'm just now starting to see success. Like I have just now made money from 4 or 5 different income streams, right? For example, I got my first Meta payout. So things are moving along. So I'm not coming to you like a lot of the guys on YouTube who are like, this is how I built a $7 million a week business. I'm coming to you with, this is how I'm almost sort of kind of breaking even on my business, because I'm just now like an airplane just taking off from the runway. And I just want to share my journey with you. Hopefully you'll share your journey with me, and we'll see where this goes. So like I said, not super inspiring, but you can kind of tell if I can do it, if I can do anything, anybody can do it. Like, for example, if I can become an engineer, well, anybody can become an engineer. I am not intelligent. So it's like, look, if I can build these businesses, you can build these businesses. And I'm really new on my business journey, so it's a perfect time to bring in people, like, not bring in people like partners, but to like bring people in on the journey, show what I'm doing. And so we're going to go into more of like what I've built, what it looks like. We'll do little tours of the things that we're doing, little demos, etc. But yeah, I just want to kind of meet you as my entrepreneurial journey takes off. Like I said, this channel is all about freedom. And so my goal is freedom. I will probably always work as an engineer, but I want to be able to know that I don't have to. And with the uncertainty in the job market, and I've been through so many layoffs in my life, that you just have to have some sort of security. And maybe if I make enough money to really that, what they call, FU money, so to speak, then maybe I can take off and achieve some semblance of freedom. But I do want to share my journey, my tips, my tricks, and help you guys avoid a lot of the pitfalls that I've ran straight into. So I'm going to break down a lot of these different businesses and a lot of these different experiences for you. All right. Have a good afternoon.